Over the last week or so, we've been saturated with liberation and tariffs and trade wars and bond markets. And I just started thinking, I wonder if there's some sort of tie into what's going on with AI. And Bob, you're over in Germany. I don't even know what the perspective is over there.
Let's just say it's not a good time to be American living in Germany. I don't think a lot of people disagree with the whole concept of tariffs. I think it's the implementation that's been the problem. There's not free reciprocal trade at the end of the day. Let's put it that way. It's pretty important, and its effects on AI, I think, are going to be pretty dramatic if they don't come to some closure on these things pretty quickly. Chips have been excluded from this, but it's not just about the chips. All those components that go into a data center, for instance, they're not made in the US. They're made in Japan. They're made in China. They're made in South Korea. They're made in Taiwan. I think it's going to actually have a dramatic effect on the progress of AI, actually, in a lot of ways. I think there is a byproduct that could pop up that will not be pleasant for people in the US. And it could lead to even a larger loss of job. Companies may decide, okay, it's time to just invest in robots because it's cheaper in the long run. It could have this effect that it actually increases the automation in the US by several years, actually.
Trade imbalance is focused on durable goods that are produced, cars and refrigerators and chipsets and motherboards and things that are durable. But the margin that we get in those things is minute compared to the service economy that we built in this country for the last 40 years. Worldwide, at a service economy, we are killing it. We have margins that are 10x the margins of durable goods. We have a presence in the world that is not only impressive, but astonishing how amazing we mastered just about everything around in the world. We create services, and we create services to write things like AI, for example, that nobody can tell for the most part. We're focusing on a trade imbalance on durable goods that, you know what? I don't want to work in a factory putting shit together. Most people don't want to do that. So why would you force the people in this country that have grown accustomed to a different lifestyle, a middle class lifestyle, and with a different economy over the last 40 years to go back to something just based on nostalgia?
Esteban's right. Tariffs are our legacy artifact. We live in a globalized world. And if we're going to stick to our guns and try to pull nationalist movements on each other and try to say, oh, we're better than you just because we are, it's going to be highly unhealthy for the global economy. Will it have impact on AI? I think it will. I think what we're really doing is we're talking about a future world that's going to be more and more unstable and more volatile. And this only adds a whole nother layer to that. Shit's going to be expensive. So the question going forward is not necessarily just about tariffs. It's about how are companies and software vendors going to respond in a world that's highly unstable and expensive. And I think there's some really cool things that can come out of that. And there's some things I'm really afraid of that are going to come out of that. One thing companies are going to do is they're going to try to achieve whatever ruthless operational efficiencies they can as kind of a squirrel in the headlights response to everything being expensive and unstable. And unfortunately, that's going to mean premature headcount reductions based on immature technology that isn't ready to replace a lot of those heads. And they're going to learn the hard way that AI is not ready. If companies are more sensible, there's actually some better paths that can be taken. I don't actually think robotics are a great candidate because, look, if companies could have replaced all the humans in the manufacturing plants by now, they would have. There's some very specific issues around physical movements in robotics that are going to make those transitions more difficult. But in white-collar settings, I think all bets are off. 3 months from now, if you can get a human on the phone in any service department for any company in America, I'll be shocked. That's not the stuff that AI is best at. And that's the tragic part of it, is that AI can actually be used to augment and enhance what we're doing and make the world a better place. And I'm afraid we're going to lose that part of the conversation right now.
The European folks, I think it was Macron, was saying part of what their response to all this might be tariffs on services and digital things.
That's right.
We are a massive net exporter of services.
What impact do you think that could have on what's going on here?
Bob would get some high fives in the bar, at least.
Are you allowed in the bars right now, Bob?
I stay out of them.
I was just saying, you're going to keep your wits about you when you do that.
I don't want to have those political discussions.
I think this is a really critical issue. And I think it is tied to both a massive kind of own goal potential here that the U.S. has created, without getting into pointing the obvious fingers. But the other aspect of this that I think is really crucial is that it is sowing such a massive amount of ill will. The thing that is far less easy to quantify because it is so intangible is the importance of collaboration and experimentation. And I think what potentially happens is that Americans and US companies are cut out of inspired, creative, collaborative activity because it's just simply a reaction on a very human level to complete dumbassery.
Just think about what's happening with all the student visas getting axed.
Talk about shooting yourself in the foot.
We depend on those students coming from China, from Japan, from Taiwan, from other countries, South America, right? We depend on that at the end of the day. And if that's going away, who's going to replace all that?
Thomas Friedman had a great article recently where he's talking about how he's been to the future and it's China. Because this is exactly what they're doing. They're not just building manufacturing capability, they're building the intellectual base to draw people from all over the world.
The real asset for the U.S. wouldn't be forcing companies to put some really crappy manufacturing jobs back here that you can't live on anyway. It would be creating the next generation of intellectual capital by investing in a diverse set of talent, because the only moat in a modern economy you can hope to build is the moat based on your own creative brilliance that is manifested in your business and your services.
There's another aspect here that I think is super interesting, and I'm reminded of a conversation I had many, many years ago with a former colleague who was a physicist by training and ended up in manufacturing and then in ERP and then, in the analyst world. The conversation was very much about the importance in chip fabrication of having R&D and manufacturing physically co-located, because there is so much innovation that can only happen rapidly when those things are in physical proximity to each other. And I think that's maybe an extreme example of where that is often true, but it's certainly not the only one. And I think there's so much disaggregation of so many things, both in manufacturing and honestly, in my opinion, in services too, that would probably benefit from kind of the pendulum swinging back the other way. I think there's room for innovation that we wouldn't be able to find otherwise. It is also about economic resilience. It is also about things like national security. It is about a whole range of issues here, not just economic top dogdom. And I think part of the challenge is if things work effectively, the pie keeps getting bigger. But at the moment, the dogma seems to be very much about a zero-sum game view of trade in anything. And I think that is probably the most harmful aspect of this whole.
And that's crazy